Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage in the absolutely beautiful state of Maine. Low 70 degrees today, low humidity, a slight breeze, perfect. I was outside working right in the sun most of the afternoon and hardly even sweat. Maybe a little bit, but that was my own fault. I could have gotten the shade, but I've already started the process. If you live up here in the Northeast or any place that it snows, you got to start thinking about your plan for the winter. And I'm moving stuff around the yard, trying to consolidate. I traded some junk for that motorcycle, so I had to load that on the trailer. So I had lots of things to do today outside, and it was a perfect day for it. The last couple days leading up to this were quite humid. Yesterday afternoon, it kind of broke. I was out 2 nights ago changing the board of my trailer that was rotten, that I wished I'd done before I tried loading the motorcycle on the trailer. But anyway, we got that done, and today was a good day. And I got done maybe, well, it's only the second day of school, and the school bus's first full day with all the students. They had sent a message during the day. They anticipated them to be a little bit late, and they were. So while I was waiting to watch the bus roar by, because I live on a dead end, but now that my son's in middle school, there's only one bus stop in the neighborhood. So I got to walk down to a house where the kids only go to school 1 or 2 days a week on the bus, but whatever. I need the exercise. So while waiting to hear the bus roar by, I started picking away at this 9-inch Ford that I'm assembling, and I have to make a correction in the last video I did talking about 9-inch Fords, and specifically the Mark Williams axle splines being different. I called Mark Williams because before I went ahead and bought the $400 spool that I thought I needed to match the axles, the salesman told me, or the tech guy, that the 35 spline, like I had in my race car, are absolutely strange. No, not strange. Strange is a brand of rear end parts, but they are different than everybody else's. And I guess that's where I got that in my head. In my head, all Mark Williams stuff was different. I thought the 40 spline was as well. He told me a 40 spline spool is a 40 spline spool, and their axles will interchange with anything. So I went ahead and trusted what I heard, mostly because that's what I wanted to believe, because I had found a spool considerably cheaper that'll be here Saturday, and I can finish this rear end up. So in the process of waiting, I had everything else to go ahead and set the pinion up and set the depth in the housing. So that is what I'm going to go over tonight. So the first thing I did is just blow the housing off after washing it down with carb cleaner. Some of the Yukons that I put together have a lot of cosmoline on them or some kind of protective coating. This wasn't bad at all. Basically blew it off with carb cleaner and blew it off with an air hose, and it was ready for assembly. What I like about these Dana Spicer housings that I found on eBay, I didn't know they were Dana Spicer, I had to do some research, but I figured it out, is they don't use the factory Ford retainer for the inner pinion bearing, the one that rides on the end of the pinion that goes in the housing itself. They use a snap ring, much like the Yukons and the ones that I like. A lot easier to take in and out with a pretty rugged set of snap ring pliers. And you're not trying to hammer this piece of garbage in there that I've seen these fall out. So anytime I don't have to run this stupid little retainer, I'm happy. So I installed the bearing in the housing. And while I was messing with the housing, I measured the caps. Like I mentioned, the potting line for the cap may or may not be in the center of the axle, which is what your reference point is for your pinion depth. This one is not. This separation favors the pinion by 11 thousandths. So I knew any measurement I do for pinion depth, I need to add that 11 thousandths back in. In fact, just to double check, I used a feeler gauge. I added it back in, in my head, and then just to be sure, why not, right? The feeler gauge is sitting right here. I set that on the housing half and measured it again to make sure I was coming up with 1 inch 31 thousandths, which is what is written right there on the stem of the pinion. 1.031. You can hardly read it, but it's easy to read. And I might as well finish my thoughts on the pinion depth. I'm doing this backwards because I haven't talked about setting up the preload of the bearings, which I had to do first. But why not? Let's talk about it backwards because I've already done it. I expected, like I mentioned in the last video, most 9-inch Fords that I do, my shim pack is going to be between 20 and 30 thousandths. This one is exactly 25, so whatever blueprint that they machine this housing off of is right on. So if it was less or more, I would think the machining process was probably not super accurate, but I'm right dead center in the range of exactly what I expected. So that makes me happy. But in order to check the pinion depth, you have to have the pinion assembled. At least to the point where the bearings are in place. I go ahead and set up the entire pinion because once this unit is done, other than putting the O-ring on, for final assembly after I know the depth is correct and I've checked the pattern, we're good to go. So the steps involved in doing this, I've covered in several videos, but I'm just going to talk about it today. I got a few more props. I could have dug out some more, but the Daytona aluminum pinion support that I got from Quick Performance, it comes without races. I think you can buy it both ways, but in this case, I'm running a small pinion, ring and pinion set. So it's 28 spline. So I ordered, or had 28 spline pinion Daytona pinion bearings. So you can look those up. If you Google it, it's going to tell you the part numbers for the Timken bearings. You have to install the races. I have, over by the press, an assortment of old races. I save anything that's round because I want to find a race that's slightly smaller than the race I'm pushing in. So I don't want to end up with 2 races stuck in the housing. And just push it down till it's flush. And you can see it on the back side, so that's easy. So find something that works and press it in front and back. I should also mention that I bought 3 or 4 of these at the time, and I haven't touched this one yet, the opening for the seal is absolutely 90 degrees. There's no bevel, so I actually chucked this in the lathe and put a slight bevel on it so I could start the seal easier. But back to bearing setup. So you got your races in the Daytona pinion support. Next, you need to install the inner, the larger of the two, with a Daytona pinion support, bearing on the pinion. This pinion is coated black, but I assume they worked that into the dimensions because it did not install with a ton of force. I have just a piece of roll cage tubing that I've got marked 28 spline. It's perfectly round on one end, and this side is slightly dented from pushing on it and everything else. I haven't hammered on it, but so one end I know goes against the bearing. This slips right over my shaft of my pinion, and depending on the space I have, if I'm lazy and don't want to move the bed of the press up and down, I can turn the whole pinion so it's facing the ground, so the nut end is facing the ground, and I can push on the back because this will stick down between my press plates till such time I can flip it over and continue this way. Otherwise, you need quite a bit of space when you start, and you may run out of stroke. So I use a combination thereof to get the inner pinion bearing pushed all the way on. Then I set the pinion, I set it on a rag actually, but right on the bench in this position. Go ahead and set my pinion support over it. And before I put in the outer bearing, which, well, let me finish my thought here. I'm not using a crush collar, I'm using a shim. I need to set my bearing preload with shims. Now there's a stack of various size shims that come with the spacer kit. The spacer is just 2 pieces of metal that hold these shims. It's shaped different on either end, but I don't really think it matters which way you put it. I have a way that I put it every time, and it really doesn't matter. I think it would fit either way. But The instructions are not specific as to which way to put it. So my method of coming up with the correct drag is to just take half the shims and set them on the bench. I don't measure a thing. I just take half the stack and do away with it. And you need to assemble the pinion. So I put the spacer in with half a stack of shims. I put the inner bearing on. This particular setup, and it varies by all of them, my yoke fit my splines perfectly. A lot of times the yoke will hang up on the splines because it's tight. This would pull right off and on. So the only drag I had putting it together was the outer bearing going down over the pinion shaft. It was tight enough you can't do it by hand, which I guess is a good thing. So I was able to just tap the yoke with my hand, and I have an old worn out pinion nut and a bunch of spacers. So I wind, with the impact, the yoke down a little bit, put a spacer in there, keep doing that until I'm tight. I know if I'm too tight, because you'll actually see that it'll grab the pinion support while the nut's still turning. And this is when I start checking it. If this gets tight before the nut's even tight, then I need more shims. I was lucky to get this one on the third try. First time, it was loose still, and you could actually rock the pinion support, but you don't want that. So I like to go till I'm too tight and then add a little bit of shim. So the next attempt, I was too tight, but not by much. And the third attempt, I took 4/1000 or 5/1000 out of the stack, whatever the shim measured out, and it's perfect. Now the shims are pretty crude. I mean, you can be way too tight and you can have no drag, or you can be pretty much what I'm at here. I mean, the book tells you to, clamp this in the vise and check the rotational torque. I can tell you that with this shim pack, you're gonna find one that has drag, and that's the one you want. I mean, I can rotate it if I was measuring that, having done a zillion of them. I know that's just fine. And I don't have a lot of lube on it. I just sprayed it with some 336 CRC, which is equivalent of WD-40, just to give it a little bit of lube. During my 3 attempts at this, I had to remove the pinion nut to get it back apart to change the shim. And then I had to put this in the press, and I could pull the pinion off. I had to push on the end of my setup nut in the press to get the outer bearing back off the shaft. It would go a little bit and then pop. The nut would catch everything so it didn't fall on the floor in the press. And I would do the process over again. Fortunately, with my yoke being able to be pulled off by hand, when I had the appropriate amount of drag, all I had to do was take off my setup nut, pop the yoke out of the way, and I, like I always do, filled the inner cavity of the seal with Vaseline, sealed the outside, and I have, because your pinion stem is sticking out, it would make it difficult to pound the seal in, so I have this piece of, I guess it's stainless tube, and it fits right over the stem. It's kind of long, but I leave it this way, and I just tap out here. It's not even straight, really. This end is. So this is my seal end. It fits a 9-inch Ford pinion seal perfect, and I'm able, with my rubber hammer, my dead blow, to pop the seal down in there nice and straight. Easier because I gave myself a little taper. And then I put clear sealer, on the splines of the pinion where the yoke's going to go, because I don't want oil seeping out of there, and a little bit under the head of the new pinion nut. At this point, I'm done with my setup nut. I put the real nut on, I tighten it up, and no matter how many times you do it, when you're all done, you're still going to be apprehensive when you grab it and spin it, even though you know it's right. You just don't want to ruin a seal and everything else and have to take it back apart. So with that done and my pinion depth set, all I need now is my 40 spline spool, which according to tracking is going to be a Saturday. And that will take the correct 3.25 bearings that have the proper ID to fit on a 35 or 40 spline spool. Press that together. I'll have to set my backlash, and then we'll check the pattern. So in the next video, we'll do just that. I'll put the bearings on. I put the pinion in without an O-ring. I just put a few bolts in it, and which of course on a 9-inch Ford is really easy. You get an eye after a while for it, because the bolt pattern is different. It only goes on one way, but in this case there's a little scratch down at the bottom. I know it goes on the bottom. So I'll put 3 bolts in here, and I'll be ready to install the carrier, the spool with the ring gear on it. And the beauty of a 9-inch Ford, one of the many, is I can pull this in and out. If I have the spool in and the ring gear on it and my backlash set, this will come right in and out. If I needed to change my depth, if I was just strictly going by pattern, I can whip that right in and out most of the time. It's been a while since I couldn't, but it depends on the ratio, I believe. I think if you had a really big head, if you had like a 308 or 273 gear, then maybe you couldn't do it, but with most of your popular ratios, I have no problem just pulling the entire pinion out, support and all. This particular ring gear has the lightning. It's been lightning, not lightning when it comes out of the sky, but lightening. It's definitely been machined to be lighter, although it's not marked on the box. It was a bargain basement ring and pinion that I bought. If you look at your markings on it, whoever was running the machine, the setup machine, they put information on it, and they will typically put a number on each one, so you know they're a pair, as long as the number is the same. A lot of times they put the initials, but anyway. Saturday, when I get the spool, we will assemble the rest of the rear end. But literally, actual time so far, I probably have 20 minutes in it. My method for measuring, I didn't cover that. You can buy fancy pinion depth setting tools. With the 9-inch Ford, all I need to use is a cheap, it's a Shaz, S-H-A-R-S, depth mic that I bought on Amazon, I think, but it works really well. Take this out of the way. My shim pack. The back of the pinion is right here. I guess I could have left the pinion and bolted it in. But, you know, first I measured the depth of each half. You know, measure the cap, measure the depth. And I guess I should also mention, before I pulled the caps off for the first time, I marked them, you know, 2 dots on the right side, 1 dot on the left side, matching upper. So I know, as long as I put the little prick punch marks together, you can't go wrong. And then I measured the calves. I wrote the difference on here so I wouldn't forget. And to measure down to the pinion stem, I just hold the depth mic right there and measure its direct reading on a 9-inch Ford. I have the correct tool to measure pinion depth, but I just don't need it on these. The first pinion depth tool that I ever had was for a Dana 60, and it was a piece of exhaust tubing that fit between 2 old bearings, and all I had to do is measure the tubing, mathematically cut it in half. That was my axle center line. It was crude but effective, so that's how I started. That was a long time ago in the back room of my parents' garage. Next time I'm at my mom's house, I will take a picture of my original shop, if you will. So now we're caught up until I get more parts. This is Thursday night, so originally I was going to shoot a quick video and move all the stuff out of the way so I could do something else. At this point, it's not taking up much space. I guess I'll just leave this corner of the bench cluttered like the rest of my shop and at least finish up this project. The rest of it, well, needs work. But again, I'm already in the cleaning mode. In the deal with the motorcycle, got a 24-foot enclosed trailer in trade. It's not in the best of shape. Hopefully roadworthy to come 4 miles to my house. And I just want to use it for storage. It's not mouse tight like my storage containers, but I'll plan accordingly. But it's, 24 feet of roof that I can hopefully gain some space in here. So that is the state of mess we got going on here. It's just too much stuff. it's not junk. There's just too much of it. So there's far too many project vehicles and all their parts. If you blow a car apart in a million pieces, man, it takes up a lot of space. But that's all for other future videos. So have a nice evening. Talk to you soon.